Hey, it's 4:20. Let's get high. I wanted to talk about one thing, but I thought, I don't know, one thing kind of led to another thing. And so I thought I'd just talk about time. I still want to talk about Abraham, but it's hard to talk about anything without understanding time. One of the conundrums of time, by the way, that science has to deal with is where is movement? Because if you stop, the only way we can measure anything is we have to stop it, and it has to start again, and it has to go from one place to another so we can measure it. And that's what time is. Time is the measurement of movement. But how does movement occur? Even if you were to say that everything has inertia, pushing forward, but time is not continual in the same way. Excuse me. In the same way that in a curve, like, is made up of many vectors. And so there's no real curved line. There's just like a bunch of vectors, little lines that minutely change the line into a curve. So science has a real problem with that, because it sees the thing in a stationary place and then in another place, but how did that come to be? So the whole idea of time, we can see from science, is really full of mystery. And because of that, because they can't really see what time is, that they plot time along a line, a straight line. It starts here, like you take a person's life, and it starts here at the first moment you're born and goes there until you finish. That's a life. But that's really not true, because and it gives like a skewed idea of really what time is about. And I think like one of the big components of my work, particularly over the last 20 years or so, a little more, even more. But anyways, that has been to be able to take the line of life and turn it into a spiral. And that's really indicates more the truth about time, because, when we're first born, like, think of all the changes that happen in the first year of a child's life. By a year, some children are already talking, and running around, and they just gone from being helpless to suddenly, being a force to contend with. After they hit one, one's a pretty good year, actually. Two is difficult. But anyways, the main thing is that so many things happen in that year that later, when they're mature, would take years to happen. to go from not knowing to speak to speak. I mean, how would that take in like a some sort of incremental way, or the amount of growth that a person does, that an infant does, for firstborn, they grow like really fast. So, and this is a sign to us that it's not just the human being that does this, but it's the whole actually universe that does this, because time is a spiral, and it began with a very, very long arc. And the first sort of iteration of time has to do from going from blue to red. The blue is like sort of like cold, and things move very slow in the cold. So this is like the slowest part of the arc, and in that time, that huge amount of things get done until finally it shifts to red, and things start happening more quickly. And so it was also, life on our planet was the same way, that in the beginning, life happened very quickly, and things that in our time we look back and we find some piece of excrement or something that's been fossilized, and we say, oh, this must be 10 million years old. Why? Because upon the line of life, it would take 10 million years for this to fossilize. And we make a big assumption that carbon-14 is always broken down at the same rate. That's how we're able to find the time to come to some kind of conclusion as to how old this thing is. However, if you look at time being a spiral, that it means that things could live, die, and fossilize probably all within 1,000 years. The first 1,000 years, things happen very quick. That's why in the first day, which is commensurate to the first 1,000 years, prototype, the only thing that was created was light. And light just goes really fast. It's kind of nothing goes faster than light. So on the and therefore in the first 1,000 years, things happen very quickly, and we look back at that and it says fossilized because we look at it as though it's a line instead of being a spiral, and this being the outer part of the spiral, which is very wide and takes a long time to make really one revolution, which means that much can happen within 1 year. And this keeps going like spiraling down. And so in the first 1,000 years, what happened is like, first of all, as is recorded in the Torah, that people lived for 1,000 years. No one lived actually to 1,000 years, but almost. That was kind of like the plan, but because people weren't so good, the longest they lived was Methuselah. He lived like 900. Let's see, Adam lived 930, so he lived more than 930, but less than 1,000. But people lived 700 years, 800 years. I mean, people lived for a very, very long time, and because the spiral of life was very wide. And so it was possible to do that, and because of this, there was so much light in the world, and there was so much possibility, and death was so far away, and it rarely happened, that people just went wild. And it says that like after 1,000 years of this, that God reduced the age of the human being to be 120, because 1,000 years was just too much havoc in the world. and there's many things that God did to try to one of the ways I believe that how God changed the lifespan, because in the beginning the earth was completely level. And by changing it, I think it's like 18 degrees. This is the tilt of the earth, which causes us then to go through seasons. If it were not for that, the weather would not so much the weather, but our relationship to the sun would always be the same. And but once we have this shift, so then we start having seasons. And I believe that it's the seasons that really shorten our lives, because it's very difficult to go through these things and people get sick and you're not used to this. It makes us stronger, but it takes its toll. And then even after that, the human being wouldn't stop. And God, there's in the papers recently about like UFOs. What are the UFOs? And only people who believe in the Big Bang theory believe in aliens. That something that can just sort of appear out of nothing and be very smart and come with their rocket ships and come down here and take us all, or something like that. But there are no aliens. But what there are entities, and there are angels, and there are what God commands as a certain type of angel, that they should go and flutter around the earth and be the eyes of God. What does God need eyes for? I mean, God sees everything, creates everything. So, and that's certainly true. God knows us on all different types of levels, knows us, atomically, organically, knows us human, knows our mind, our hearts. But in order for God to see the world the way we see the world, so God needs eyes. So God tells these angels, go down and just flit around, go in the ocean, go up here, go up there. But because they're spiritual, you can't really, find them and track them, because spirituality only has a tiny bit of corporeality in it, in the same way that corporeality only has a tiny bit of spirituality in it. See? And that's why they're able to move so fast and stuff like that. But these are the eyes of God, and God looked around at the earth and saw that there was semen everywhere. And God said, the earth needs a bath, and brought the great flood and killed all these people, but then reincarnated them into the time after the flood, because God really liked these people, wanted to give them the Torah, but they were just too out of control. And God realized, I need a more moderate person. And so God demised these dudes and then brought them back. And this was the generation that came out of Egypt and received the Torah. God wanted to give it to them. God did, but just in different bodies at a different time. And in order to do this, see, when God first created the world, created the human being, that the angels warned him, that he might fuck up. This guy is, we don't know about him. He's human. And God says, it's the human soul, and all souls, come from this first human soul that God created and blew all the souls of humanity into this person. And so what happens if this first person has such a blemish, there's something so wrong that it'll never get fixed? What then? But God said, don't worry. I got Abraham in my pocket. If autumn doesn't turn out so good, Abraham will make things right. And that's what's happened. And it's like impossible to talk about history, without Abraham. Abraham changed absolutely everything. And the way that it is, like 4,000 years ago, at the beginning of the 2,000 years of teaching, Abraham leaves Ur Kasdim and begins his travels to the earth. He leaves, I believe, at the age 52 and hangs out somewhere in between until he leaves again, commanded by God, Lech Lecha, go out, come to this world. Where was he? He was on Mars, because that's where the Tower of Babel is built. The Tower of Babel is built on Mars. And one of the proofs of this is they say that the top of the tower blew off, just nisra, burnt up. And the bottom part of the tower, that it fell down to the ground, and the people inside of it turned into ape-like creatures. Maybe the dudes who like painted in the caves and stuff. And the middle part, because that's where Avram was, and angels told God, you can't destroy that. I mean, Avram's there. Avram's going to fix everything up. So God said, all right, and left a third on Mars. How do we know that it describes it as being so tall? The third that was left was so tall that you could walk 3 days beneath its shadow. And we only find things like this on Mars. There's nothing like this even close. But there's a lot of this like on Mars. And, there's many things that are just, all these little kind of hints. Nothing really, but the Torah is, in many ways it talks, right? Even it's hidden stuff. It's not going to say Mars, but, it says that it does mention Mars enough times that we sort of get that understanding. And also they understood that that Mars was the previous world, called Tohu. And the reason it was Tohu is because the way that God created creation, who created the galaxy, is that all the stars in the galaxy are pointed at our solar system. Why? Because God wanted to be known and low, and God said, that's low. And how did God make our solar system low? So God took a pebble from beneath God's foot. Obviously, God doesn't have a foot. As at the throne of God. And the throne of God means is kind of a place for God to hang out that hovers over creation. And God took a pebble from the foot of the throne and placed it in our solar system to be in a place that would be exactly eclipsed by the moon when the moon eclipsed the sun. And that's what God did. And that's why our world grows, it's alive, because of where it came from. It didn't come from the actual, galaxy. The last place in the galaxy, the lowest place in the galaxy, is Mars. And we know this from the Zohar, that it only explains the coming, the creation of the stars and the planets until Mars. And Mars is known by the number 42, which is 6 times 7, which implies a complete individuality. And where sex was not relevant. It was there, but it just wasn't relevant. Everything was an individual. And so this world is supposed to fix that. We're called Tikkun Fixing. And therefore, we're about 7 times 7, which is 49, and 50 is forever. And we see 50 times, many times, has to do with a transition. And from 1970 into 2020, those 50 years are very significant. Because talking about carbon 14, it has a half-life of 5,730, which in the Hebrew calendar was 1970. When the 60s ended, the 70s begun, everyone felt a change. It was very weird. And what's the change? That the carbon 14 in the human body, in everyone's human body, had become half. Like we had finished a cycle. And then 50 years after that, we come to 2020, where we see that we're on the cusp of a huge change. Because, the human being has been able to sort of step back and see what, a true rat race this world was. And how we're all being enslaved so that some rich dude can go up into outer space, And people don't want to go back to work. People are seeing that the corporations are suffering and they don't want to go back to work. Let them suffer. Let them give people better wages. But that's not going to, fix our problem. But anyway, I really wanted to talk, about Avraham. And so after the flood, there was Noah and his 3 sons, and this was a more moderate people. And these are basically the 3 colors, of blue, green, and red, which translated into Asian, African, and Occidental. But right in the middle of it, in the Middle East, because it came down. The Noah's Ark came down in Turkey, on Mount Ararat, and I probably didn't pronounce that correct. And it came down, so the people like right there, was like kind of the mixed human being, because that's where they all intermingled before they went off to take their continents. And these are the Semitic people. And this is where Abraham comes from. His father came from Samaria, somewhere like that. It's not clear whether Abraham was actually born in the Tower of Babel, or whether he was brought there by his father. But he was there, and from that standpoint, they were convinced that they ruled the world. And who was, the king of their rulership was a guy named Nimrod. And Nimrod says about him that he was the first human being who used speech to fool people. He didn't lie, but he seduced people to do what he wanted them to do. And he was a very good, talker, I guess. And, now everyone can do that, everyone kind of supposed to do that. But it was considered like a real change in human evolution, that the human being before that was just a true person. And this guy, he had an idea, but he needed other people to give up their individuality so he could, do what he wanted to do. And it's very similar to today. It's the same situation that we have, whether it's one person or a few people who are pushing the world in a particular way. And in order to do that, they have to convince their populace. It's like with war. But if the leader wants to go to war, they give some bullshit reason. I was involved in the Vietnam War, and it was all about, oh wow, man, the Vietnamese shot at some ship. So that was that was war. They didn't actually declare war. They declared a peace act, but they started a war. It was just a justification of the war. And the same with 9/11. It was used as a justification to go start two wars. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a deterrent. It was a justification to go on and get everyone all upset about this. And we got to do it. And pretty soon we're involved in a 20-year war. And who did this? George Bush, who, what did he do in college? He was a cheerleader. That was his, his expertise, to go out there and cheer on the troops. Remember, bring it on, man. He didn't care. He was sitting in the White House in Washington. He was telling, bring it on my shoulders. I don't care. Bring them on. They'll take care of themselves. This is not a good leader. This is a person who wants war, because war is endemic to America, because we started our country through war, and war has been big business, particularly since World War II. We got out of that with what President Eisenhower called, the industrial, military, the military industrial whatever. And that's what we have. We got industry together with military, colluding with religion, who is making everyone stupid and dogmatic. So when the leader gets up and like a sheep points one way, everyone will point after him. And this is just, really bad for our country. And thank God, even though we suffered in many different ways, but thank God for COVID. COVID put an end to it. They'll never be able to reestablish this, because we see what it is and we don't want it. We want something better, something that serves the human being, because America is supposed to be a place of individuals, not like it was in Tohu, in the last kind of iteration of of the galaxy that produced seeds that eventually were transported to the earth through a stream of water. There's water inside of Mars, but it had to come together with the earth, which is really the soul of the universe. This is the lowest place in the universe. This is what God wanted, is to be known in low. And we are the lowest generation. So, and we're only 220 years from the end of the, the 6,000 year calendar. So it's extremely important that we get our shit together, which means, first of all, we have to wake up to what reality is. And the Roman reality is just a lie, from one end to another, from their religion to their economics, to their philosophy. I mean, the roads are pretty good. Other than that, I think Rome pretty much sucks, and they're going around the world trying to convince everyone they're the greatest, and they're not. And we are really the head of Rome, and that's why we can change everything. So thank you for listening to me. I hope you got somewhat educated about these things, and we'll continue maybe tomorrow talking about Abraham. There's so much to say about him. And feel free to send me questions. And please go to my website, Dovid House, dovidhouse.com. Publishing company. I'm publishing all my books. And my first book is Sex, a Metaphor to History, Trump 777 and the 1,000 Years of History. So check it out, and And what else? Just to say goodbye and see you later.